Thank you for your very kind invitation to speak before you today. I've only recently started teaching, and it's one thing standing in front of students. It's an entirely different prospect standing in front of teachers. So thank you for your patience over the next 10 minutes or so. As a former pupil of an ASTI school, Tulla Community School in County Carlow, I'm especially proud to recite our own motto before you, which encapsulates the ethos of the message that I'd like to talk to you about today. So our motto in Tullow was to nurture the well-being of all so that they may grow in knowledge, conscience and compassion. And it sums up very much the spirit of educationists and what they seek to achieve. So the focus over the next week really in these teacher conferences will look at your response to the public sector reform deal recently brokered at Croke Park. And the motions in your convention handbook reflect the very deep and genuine concern among teachers regarding the security of your jobs, pay and pensions. And media attention will also focus on the trade union movement and how cohesive or not it is, and the cracks, the crevices between the trade union membership and its leadership. And I understand why this is the focus, and I understand why that is the case. But my argument for you today, and my respectful suggestion, is that that's maybe missing the point. Because perhaps in conferences like this, there also should be real and meaningful discussion about the future of education and the future direction of our Irish education. So in order to talk about the future, I'm going to bring you on a brief journey to the past. And Professor Tuhig and Joe Moran mentioned 1995, the year I got my junior cert. But I'm going to bring you on a journey of the past and eventually bring you back up to the future, to 2015. So on this brief historical journey I'm going to bring you on, I want to talk to you about how the nature of the state changed because of bold political reforms of the 19th century and bold political reforms, or bold educational reforms of the 21st century. And those reforms and the way the nature of the state changed in the 19th century and the 20th century have lessons for us perhaps on how we can change the future direction of Ireland in the 21st century. So in the 19th century, the extension of voting rights transformed forever the nature of the Irish state. So you had the 1829 Catholic Emancipation Act and the 1832 Reform Act. And that brought about wide-ranging changes for the Irish electoral system, which saw Catholics elected and stand in Parliament for the first time. So you had Daniel O'Connell and his 31 MPs. And they commanded considerable political influence and were rewarded with particular reforms in return for supporting the Whigs in government. And a similar dynamic occurred, which earned Charles Stuart's Parnell statue on the top of O'Connell Street in the 1880s. And the Secret Ballot Act of 1872 introduced the privacy of the ballot and created the context for the revolutionary decade of the 1880s. And as a direct consequence of these reforms, Parnell's Irish Parliamentary Party held the balance of power. And even though I went to school in Carlow, I'm actually from Wicklow, so I can say this with great pride. So a Wicklow man, Charles Stuart Parnell, had now held the seat of the British Empire to political ransom, which was an extraordinary feat. So in the 20th century, it was access to education rather than access to voting that changed the nature of the Irish state. And Ireland, I would suggest, has been in the 20th century defined by three waves of educational reform, just as the 20th century was, or the 19th century was defined by different waves of voting reforms. So the first one was the 1908 Irish Universities Act, which established the National University of Ireland. And until that time, Catholics did not have the opportunity to access third-level education, and because the church hierarchy had prohibited Catholics from attending the place I now work in, Trinity College Dublin, because that university refused to teach theology. But that extraordinary opportunity, that 1908 Act, educated the emerging political class and the civil service class. So it educated and gave third-level education for the first time. People like Eamon de Valera, Paddy McGilligan, O. McNeill, John A. Costello, Michael Hayes, Kevin Shields, and a whole other list of individuals. And it was here, because of that act, that the majority of the very public-spirited and very able young men, and they were all men, of the civil service, the army and the police were educated, that formed the foundation of the state. And the second educational reform of the 20th century was Donegal O'Malley's Free Education Act, which transformed access to education. And no longer was education a right limited to a privileged minority, but was a right extended to the majority. And the third wave of education reform, imperfect as it was, saw the abolition of university fees in 1995, and over 55% of school leavers now attend third level education as a direct consequence of that, including me. If that hadn't come in, I probably would not have been able to access third level education, being the oldest of 7 children. So these 3 waves of educational revolutions, the National University Act, the extension of free post-primary education and free third level education, coincided with greater political and economic freedoms in the state. But what type of revolution will distinguish the 21st century Ireland? If our country is going to emerge poetically like a phoenix from the ashes, then I believe that it's through education, once again, that this will occur. And in order to tell you how this is going to happen, my sincere and genuine belief that it is the Sex Pistols that have in their unlikely procession the answer to Ireland's current economic, political and ethical crises of authority. And as I said in my column in the Irish Times today, the lyrics of the punk rock lyrics of the Sex Pistols, of this famous song that they had, "Goodbye authority, the ones who think they know it all. Just take a look at the world they've made." And that song was taken from a song called "Revolution in the Classroom." So I would submit to you here today that it's no coincidence that the lead singer of the Sex Pistols, Johnny Rotten, has heritage in Galway. He's of the Lydens of Tuam, I believe, and that as we sit here today in Galway at this ASTI conference, which convenes in the City of Tribes for the 88th annual convention to celebrate a century of educational service, maybe we can learn the sentiment of those lyrics, and the sentiment of which, as the teachers, you have an enormous and fantastic opportunity to influence the type of Ireland that will distinguish this century.